Well, hello and welcome to all of our viewers around the world. I'm Fiona Langsharp, IBCLC Director of Communications and MC here at Gold Learning and Gold Midwifery. What a pleasure to sit down with Hermine Hayes-Klein today. And I say that because I just got a little bit of an inside scoop listening to Hermine, who's going to be with us here at Gold Midwifery this year. And so talking about protecting your midwifery practice, legal strategies for practicing with confidence. And I know we all need that confidence. Hermine, please go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you are in the world.
Yeah, but thank you, Fiona. It's a pleasure to see you this morning. I'm a lawyer and I live in Portland, Oregon. And my work as a lawyer really pertains to human rights in childbirth and pregnancy and childbirth. So this came out of my experience of living and giving birth in the Netherlands in 2007 and 2010, while also teaching law there and in The Hague, which is an international law sort of capital, and enabled me to really study and learn about childbirth and midwifery around the world. And so out of that experience really came my understanding that women's rights are violated broadly in maternal health systems around the world, and that midwives aren't as secure as they deserve to be in many of these systems as well. And so now my work as a lawyer really comes into two parts. Half is really advocating for midwives, especially community midwives, but also midwives in the hospital setting, being able to practice, in a way that is safe for them, respected. And by safe, I don't just mean you're not going to be jabbed with a needle. I mean that you actually get to feel safe in doing the very important work you do, because, of course, fundamentally, in order to give birth as mammals, we need to feel safe. And so then, and that's what midwifery is kind of all about, is supporting people to be able to go through the physiological process of childbirth. But if in order to support that mammal in feeling safe herself or their self in birthing the baby, those around them need to feel safe too. And so that's a lot of my work, is really defending midwives, advocating for their right to payment and coverage, and their right to just generally be respected as the experts that they are in physiology, and working with pregnant and birthing patients. And then the other half of my practice is really standing up for the right of informed consent in all settings. So that includes bringing lawsuits against hospitals and obstetricians for what is called in many places obstetric violence, which really comes down to the violation of patients' rights during childbirth, and trying to close that gap between the law of informed consent, which is pretty clear everywhere, and then the culture of obstetrics, which tends to ignore the law of informed consent for all kinds of cultural and historical reasons. So that's what I do as a lawyer. And so I'm very happy to come into Gold Midwifery's conference this year and to share some strategies for midwives advancing their security and their work where they live, both individually, but also working together collectively to help make midwifery more secure. So that was our talk that we
that's wonderful. Yeah. And you touched on all of those points, and really sort of led us to expand our thinking in terms, like our critical thinking, our knowledge around advocacy, how to remain together instead of splintering or separating, which you said is not uncommon. And so, there are lots of fantastic points in the presentation. I know people are not going to want to miss out on this opportunity to come and listen to you. I did have a couple of questions for you in terms of, just what is out there right now. Sometimes it feels very heavy, Hermine, in terms of midwifery care, the legalities behind it. Have things changed, over the last, several years? Have you been, as you've been practicing, have you seen changes? Tell me what has been happening.
It's such an interesting question, Fiona, because we could ask it not only, say, about the last 5 to 10 years, but about the last 25 to 30. You know what I mean? Sure. And so it's like, when you look at this arc, if you even take it back to 1970, last 50, right? Like, let's look at that, right? So it's like, if you're in just the last 50 through the 70s, both say United States and UK, to take two two nations. Those were nations when through the 70s and the 80s, midwifery was kind of, in the United States, it was digging itself out of the ground. It was buried in. It had been basically murdered and buried in the 1930s, 20s, 30s. And then in the 1970s, with the hippie movement and the women's movement, there started to become sort of a rebirth of midwifery, and then advocacy for midwives becoming legal and being allowed to work in the hospital, being allowed to work out of hospital. And similarly in the UK, for example, there was all kinds of just fabulous feminist advocacy in childbirth in general. You think about AIMS, which was an organization doing a lot to advance maternal health services and women's rights within them. And these groups changed a lot. They got midwifery back on the map. They got, women's rights respected, and midwives got much, much stronger in the UK, for example. But then simultaneous with that, we had the release of the electronic fetal monitor into hospitals in the 1970s. And then out of that came the spike of the C-section rate, which is attributable to the dissemination of this useless monitor. Right. And so, so then we had in 15 years, the C-section rate go from 5 to 33%. And then spit us into the world we're in. And then out of that come VBAC bans. Oh, we cut the baby out the first time. We're going to do it every time from now on. Even though by the fourth time we do it, your chance of dying is 7%.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And so it's in a way, what that reflects is it's getting more intense on both sides, right? Almost like the stakes are going up. And I would say in a way that continues, right? So it's on the one hand, so ever since then, obstetrics has been doing things to women that aren't necessary and that create unnecessary risks for at least a century. You had the general anesthesia deliveries, you had delivery under twilight sleep. Then we moved into the era of the forceps and the episiotomy with the epidural. And then we move into the era of the cesarean section. And in a way, it's as the cesarean section has spiked, and in some places around the world, we're looking at 50% or more, 75% or more, 80 to 100% or more, as you know, in South America, China, South Africa, in the developing world, in many places, women are on C-section assembly lines. And so then in response to that, you get all these women's movements naming obstetric violence and passing laws about it, So it's it's all happening, but I would say we're still at a fork in the road. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So even coming back to these last few years, it's both happening. There's both stuff happening. There's a lot of awesome stuff happening around, organization of Black Moms Matter and recognition of racism and its impacts, discrimination and its impacts. Doulas are becoming stronger, and at the same time, it's systems are very, very abusive, and you can say that they've become more abusive. This whole 100% C-section rate that happens in so many places. There's more. There's always new technologies. The screw in the head for the baby. That's a whole conversation we can have. That women are just told it's a sticker. I've seen women send photos of how it broke their baby's skull and it can't be fixed.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think, and now there's actually talk of growing the whole baby. Elon Musk would prefer for the whole baby to be grown from conception through delivery in a pod. Right. And I could see that moving us to a place where it's you want to grow the baby in your body. Now you're privileging your pregnancy experience over the nice, safe pod, and why would we let you do that? Your stress hormones, maybe you'll want to drink a wine. That could be where we're going in the next. So I'd say the stakes are high and the intensity has been, there's reason for hope. And that reason, if anything's going to change in childbirth, it's going to be because women stand up for their own rights. And they are doing it in many places. They're passing laws. But the pushback and the stakes and the financial stakes of the system they're confronting are extreme.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think about all the things that are happening and what I've seen in my time as well. And I was going to ask you a question about just briefly about advocacy, because I know this is something that you work in as well. So are we seeing a decline in advocacy, or are people starting to stand up and say enough already?
I think we are seeing we are not seeing a decline in advocacy. We are seeing an expansion in advocacy. And it's, again, this is so interesting. Also talking to you as a trained doula, doulas are the space in which that's really the expansion of doulas is the expansion of advocacy and maternal health care, except for all those doulas who believe advocacy is outside their scope. Right. And who were taught to believe that using your mouth to say, she said, no, you can't do that to her, is outside their scope. That's a nonsense concept, which we could have a whole recording just on that. And doulas don't have a scope. They're not licensed professional. They have a job description. And each doula gets to decide for herself whether advocacy is part of that job description. I have other strategies for doulas on how to do that in a way that's safe for doulas and protective of them, where they can be safe while they're protecting their clients' rights. There are ways to do it. But I guess one more point on that, and as there's so much to talk about in this area, but like a big form that advocacy is taking, for better or for worse, is unassisted birth. You know what I mean? I would actually say there's this, that's also a big, one more sort of data point on like the intensification, of what's happening here, is that when midwives feel that supporting a woman's choice is outside their scope, or they're going to get in trouble for supporting her vaginal birth after 2 cesareans, at home. Women are giving birth at home after 2 cesareans alone. Same with the breech, same with the twins. Yeah. So it's like, back to that abortion analogy, when you take away healthcare support for reproductive choices, you don't change women's reproductive choices. This is why it's the right to privacy, because these are our private personal choices that we make for private personal reasons. Some politicians or doctors or other neighbors' opinion about your body and your life, irrelevant. So it's like, you're going to make your decision about what you need for you and your family on the basis of the information that only you have. And when we take away healthcare support for predictable decisions, all we do is increase death. All we do is punish women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the most positive response to.
No, I really appreciate that. I think that, it's knowing that the dumbing down, even within a profession that really is about advocacy, is still very concerning. And I think people listening in will hear that and know that. And hopefully that will, again, intensify their responsibility or get them back to where their roots were. Because many of us that work in the birth field, that's why we got here in the first place, was to, to advocate for the families that we work with. Hermine, thank you so much. We could talk all day.
When you come to Portland, come visit, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. Yeah. Thank you so much once again. Please tune in to listen to Hermine Hayes-Klein talking about protecting your midwifery practice, legal strategies for practicing with confidence. It will be live as part of our conference at goldmidwifery.com this year. Thank you again, Hermine. We'll look forward to seeing you all again and appreciate your time today. Bye-bye for now, everyone.